Thanks for staying with us. Power belongs to the people. Yeah. Question is which power? Because, the federal government has unveiled plans to boost electricity supply by wheeling a minimum of 10,000 megawatts of electricity. That's the power we're talking about. Do the people have it? When will the people have it significantly? Well, that's what's on the burner this morning. Ahmed Zakari joins us. He's special advisor to the president on infrastructure. He joins us from our Abuja studio, as well as Dr. Sam Amadi, who is former chairman of NERC. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, first of all, let me begin with you, Dr. Amadi. The issues are quite significant, but then the question is, from what you know, what had been the shortfall and how significantly do you think those issues have been addressed?
Metering and its crisis, major legacy crisis in the sector. So let's start today. But clearly, by the time I left NEC, I did the first inquiry led by late Bamidele Turu, and that inquiry turned out we had close to maybe less or close to 40% of customers who are actually metered. At the last count, I look at NEC's report, we probably between 40 to 45% who are metered customers. So what that means basically, or at most 50%, it means that at least half of our customers are not metered or properly metered at all. So that's what we are faced with. And why does it arise that way? Because three things happen at the same time. One is the financial crisis of the sector, pre and post reform, meant that the discos were not rolling out meter as they ought to. By the regulation of NEC, all customers ought to be metered. In fact, as a matter of fact, if you were to follow the regulations strictly, there'd be no unmetered customer, because the regulation stipulates that the customer has to be connected only with a measuring instrument. But if you follow that, that means we have to disconnect millions of customers who don't have a metering instrument. So we have this because we're not rolling out meter because of financial insolvency. At a point, the incentive became that the operators had more to gain from metering, not metering customers. Of course, we knew that even before.
So, Dr. Amadi, essentially, it sounds like you're saying that the major issue here is metering the people.
But what led to it is first financial crisis of the discourse before now and after. And secondly, the incentive structure that meant that it's often better to get build the customers without metering. But again, since now we started the reform, the crisis has been that the methodology for metering, its rollout, financing, logistics does not close the gap quick. And in this industry, you're going to have new customers as people build houses, as people urbanize. As we urbanize, we have more customers come to the grid and less, and then those who have meter falter, meter spoils, and so it looks like an increasing crisis there.
All right. Well, that's clearly an issue as far as you're concerned, but and it's something that is of concern to the federal government as well, from what we know. Well, let me take this to Mr. Zakari, who is special advisor to the president on infrastructure. Well, it's been a promise that the federal government has made over time, and it seems from what you have heard from the former chairman of NERC, a major issue if government is going to deliver on its promise. How far so far, and how soon?
So I think, thank you for having me this morning. The question around metering is very essential in the sector. And if you notice, it was one of the key areas that the Honorable Minister of Power in his 50-day summary talked about as a continued focal point. But we have to, as Nigerians, appreciate progress and also provide feedback on where we need to improve. So on the first area of appreciating progress, since privatization in 2013, 2014, there has never been a fully funded national metering program. What that meant is that in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 2020, we allowed the customer growth with our population growth to increase without any stable or clear plan to solve metering, which is the primary basis for the economic viability of the sector. This administration led very aggressively with the National Mass Metering Program. Phase 0, if you imagine, had to overhaul the entire metering infrastructure of the country. Why do I say this? Prior to the National Mass Metering Program, a maximum of only 200,000 meters had ever been rolled out in 1 year in Nigeria since privatization. With the National Mass Metering Program now, in just about 10 months, we've rolled out almost 1 million meters. What does that mean? We increased the capacity of the market to absorb meters by a multiple of 5. That requires significant heavy lifting. When we started the National Mass Metering Program, you could imagine even trained meter installers were a problem. We started with only a capacity per month of 10 to 12,000 meters that could be installed. But we've now come through, and in some months we've done up to 100,000 meters. Now we're going into the second phase, or as we call it, phase 1, and we'll roll out another 4 million meters fully funded. The Ministry of Power is leading on policy direction. We have full financing support to the DISCOs by the Central Bank of Nigeria, facilitated by the Development Finance Department. And as a group, even in my secretariat, we monitor this daily. We know the geolocation of every Nigerian that's been metered. So my point is, the gap continued growing and there was no program. There is a program now. We've significantly ramped up the capacity. And we believe that into next year, with this program to only fund local meter manufacturers, the job impacts that you're going to see both on installation and manufacturing are going to be a game changer.
All right, let's talk about...
We're very happy with the progress, but we know we need to do more. Okay.
Let me bring you, Dr. Amadi, on this, because this National Mass Metering Program, there was a MAP scheme before this one. You say you had to overhaul that, which suggests that the previous program was not good enough. So, Dr. Amadi, you were there at the time. So how come the MAP scheme wasn't good enough?
I hold the view that CAPMI, the Created Advanced Meter Program, is still the best program, and that's why it's signed up. What does that mean? There are 3 problems. If you want to solve a problem in public first, you diagnose what is the problem, what fits into that problem, what are the incentive structure, the economic incentives that have that problem. So the problem of metering is first financing. Second is logistics, like he pointed out. Do you have the meter manufacturers, installers trained, ready to scale up? And the third problem is the economic incentive. Who cares about metering? Why would the operator invest in metering? Okay, now, CAPMI says, look, the best way is to crowdsource financing, meaning let's ask the consumers who want to be first on the line to pay for the meter. And the structure was very clear. We got bulk certification by the Nigerian procurement, Bureau for Public Procurement, so there's no problem of procurement. They certified us. We certified all installers, all manufacturers, and importers, fully certified. So that the DISCO has no problem certifying. It has to choose from the list. And the customers pay into an escrow, where in 14 days, the installer who has incentive to roll out more meters, because the more he installs, the more he gets paid, would go to that install, knowing that the money is out of the DISCO's control. So that system would have worked well. It needed to be monitored like they're doing now. But the minister then, Fashola, removed and brought MAP, which I said then that MAP would fail, because MAP is trying to insert manufacturers into the business operations of DISCOs with the attendant risk and and this mistrust, and therefore it collapsed. I wasn't surprised. Now, this new initiative is good. It's good because government is dealing with one aspect, which is financing and the logistics. Well, it's very good. But again, the report from feedback from operators and from consumers that the discos actually are using this meter plan to remove bad meters and optimize revenue, not as much as closing the gap. So if, for example, you come to Abuja, it's a distribution territory, and they have meters they think are either not running well, hampered, or poor meters, and they first phase them out. What that means that they are increasing chances of controlling revenue maximization. But again, they're not as quickly as they're rolling out to mitigate rate impact of exposed customers who the volumetric impact of tariff increase for those who are unmetered is that they cannot conserve power, mitigate their volumetric impact, and reduce costs for themselves. So primarily, I think it's a good idea what the government is doing, and I commend what they do. But I think that probably they need to go back to CAPMI and unlock crowdfunding. And the beauty of CAPMI, which we did, was that CAPMI destroys the incentive not to meter, because it's not in the disco's hand to say we don't meter. The metering speed is driven by how much customers contribute, how quickly they contribute, and how the installers want to make more money. And these installers are certified technically, certified commercially, so they want to roll out more meters. So this new plan, the central bank is funded, is good. But again, it's the discos who are now inserted again in the control room. So because these are debts they are going to pay for when it's a debt that will mature. So they are in charge. They are going to have financial liability. So they roll out at their own ease and to mitigate more of revenue crisis rather than customer crisis. Okay,
very quick one, Dr. Amadi. How many programs concerning this metering program have we had in how many years?
Well, I think all I know is before now, there was also before we came what they call the meter maintenance fee, which was a very fraudulent way of collecting money to maintain a meter that doesn't exist. But from our own time, we only had CAPMI, and then we now have MAP. MAP, essentially, let's not forget, MAP is trying to create a subsidiary economic activity around meter provision.
Okay.
Fiscal services. So it's then now have this government plan can go with any of these plans. The what government is doing actually very wisely is to bridge the funding gap and help discos to meter the customers as a way of controlling debt overhang, reducing debt, as well as customer satisfaction. I think it's a good idea, but it needs to be strengthened.
Okay. All right, Dr. Amadi. Mr. Zachary, I think the challenge here is that of, well, it sounds like the challenge is that of stability and continuity. I mean, I've heard, like, how many programs now? CAPMI, MMM, MAP, MMF, okay, whatever it is. So the challenge there is sounding like, unless people can have confidence in a sustained program, we may not be able to run out of this issue. From one of the, you opened by talking about the 50-day press statement of the Minister of Power, and he's talking about a need to rejig some things in the power sector value chain. How sustainable is the program that we're having on our hands now to achieving this goal that government has? Because it would seem like unless, government is able to see some track record within a short time, we may change this program again. What's the plan to ensure sustainability of this particular program so that there is a little bit more incentive when people see that there is continuity?
I think first and foremost, what is required is policy direction and alignment within policymakers on what needs to be done. This national mass metering program, as it is, has very clear policy direction. Mr. President is of the mind and has made it clear through his statements that we do not believe that Nigerians should pay for meters, especially when in the financial model for cost recovery for a disco, those meter fees are already factored in. What we've done is to say that we're going to provide liquidity as loans to discos for them to be able to meet their obligations. Secondly, we have to look at the results. I mean, I don't think anybody will espouse that we should continue to do things that don't work. As I've told you, if we are fair and objective about our assessment, maximum number of meters ever executed under any program, 200,000 a year. In 10 months, we did 1 million. We're going to close this metering gap by the end of the life of this administration. The regulator, based on that policy directive, has actually set out a new set of guidelines, one that ensures that there's a clear trajectory on how we execute this phase 1 of the National Mass Metering Program, which is the second phase with local meter manufacturers. And then, as we've said, the central bank and the financial institutions are providing the liquidity. And then we're monitoring this very actively with the Ministry of Power and some of the other offices that are involved in this and NERC. But we have to do what works. And since we're having a program that is having success, we're going to continue along that. And lastly, I'll say we must domesticate these industries. So when the central bank governor came out and said that we will only fund local meter manufacturers, what this says is that the sustainability is there. Nobody's going to come and install meters and run away. When you have a local manufacturer, a local installer, we know where to go when this doesn't work. So, you know, 1 million meters in 10 months and complete overhaul on training and other things has been a huge task, but we're up to the task. And the next round, a very ambitious target of 4 million meters, will also execute that.
Well, everyone is definitely looking forward to that, Mrs. Zachary. But you began this session by talking about formidable policy direction. So, advise those who have paid in the previous programs of CAPMI. What's going to happen to the investments those ones have made? There are those, I know 1 or 2 people who have paid a lot of money to the tune of 100,000 naira for 1 meter. One of them at least has said. So what's going to happen to those ones? Join that with this conversation we had with the MD of MoMA's meter manufacturing company that talked about the fact that government might be going back to the MAP program as well in the event that maybe one fails or for one reason or the other. Put us through on that so that at least people are clear on the policy direction and the program to follow.
Okay, I think one of the things we've done is to review the regulatory framework, and we must commend NERC for doing a very robust job and setting out the new regulatory guidelines that incorporate NMMP, talk about the condition of maps, as well as funding by suppliers for meters. So those guidelines have been out there, available on NERC's website, but I'll summarize directly related to your questions. One was this point of those who paid in the past. As we've said, the obligation to meter is on the distribution companies. Anyone who has paid, there's very clear guidelines on how they will get a credit back on their meter that will reduce the cost of their periodic top-up of credit. And that's been mandated, and it's in the regulatory guidelines. So I'd like to clearly state here for Nigerians that the guidelines are that if you've paid, that money will be returned. Secondly, our main government program is the National Mass Metering Program, and the intent of government is that everyone should get a meter without paying for it. But the regulator also recognized that we have to be a nation of rules and laws. So what was done was to say, if a MAP has an existing contract to supply meters to a disco at a process where consumers that don't want to wait for the NMMP would like to buy, that they can continue that. And it was because we had some legal cases that were coming up, some challenges, and MAPS was saying that NMMP, despite them having a supply contract with the DISCO, will come and wipe that out. But this raises another question, which I'm sure you will bring up, which is the concept of, can people take free meters and be selling them? So with NEMSA, and we had a very robust conversation last week with the labor leaders who have been part and parcel of designing and directing this program as part of our joint FGN and Labor Committee on Electricity Reform. NEMSA came and they had to explain to us that for the seals, after they certify meters, once they come in before they go to a consumer, all the NMMP meters will be sealed with NMMP tag. So a consumer knows that this is not a meter that anybody should ever ask you for money for. And then if there's a MAP meter that a particular supplier has brought in and said this is for sale for any consumer that doesn't want to wait for NMMP, then that will also be appropriately tagged. But as I said, we anticipate that 90% of all meters that are going to come will come from NMMP.
Well,
but for some consumers that may want to go ahead, there is that small window with the maps. But also the map pricing is going to be tied to whatever the competitive price for NMMP is.
Right, you ended up answering that question. I mean, you asked it and you answered it. But the challenge here is, I mean, can't one tag maybe for the NMMP be used on the map or otherwise? But we're running out of time. And you know, the issue around the power sector is always a lot, really, before we start unknotting it. Just two quick things I want you to respond to briefly before I take this back to Dr. Amadi. You have set that ambitious target that you will close the metering gap before the life of this administration runs out. What exactly is the gap? How many people do not have meters right now? Or how many households, as the case may be?
So the challenge with anything is, you know, with time, there's a dynamic growth that will happen in the population. And at the time this program was started, we had a 6 million metering gap. 1 million deployed through phase 0, 4 million will be deployed through phase 1, and then we'll have another program at the World Bank that we're working on that will cover another 1 million that is running in parallel, all under this NMMP guideline. But we do know that in the population of consumers, there are still meters that are bad. Dr. Amadi raised that need to be replaced. And then with customer enumeration, the number is growing. But what will happen is, once you have a localized industry that with vibrant meter manufacturers and more robust DISCOs, any additional gap from increased enumeration, the industry should be able and will be able to cover it. But the number that we targeted, which was 6 million, we will achieve that target through the phases of the NMMP. And
are
whatever
you saying
remnants,
that
because
the number of unmetered Nigerians is 6 million?
We believe that the market will catalyze it.
Can you hear me? Is the number of unmetered Nigerians 6 million?
So that's what I explained to you. The number of unmetered Nigerians at the start of NMMP was 6 million.
What is it now?
Can I tell you that the number will stay stagnant? It won't stay stagnant. So what I'm saying is, at the end of the life of the program, you can imagine that new customer growth, there'll still be
so we don't know what it is now. Is that the point?
Outside of that 6 million. Say that again?
We don't know what the figure is now.
No, I think with additional enumeration, perhaps there might be an additional 2 million customers that have come into the landscape. And that's, as I said, number may continue to evolve. But the 6 million target that was 100% of the gap. If you imagine that can be closed within the life of the administration, any additional unmetered populations will have to look at that from a
6
policy
million,
perspective.
2 million,
But
that's
as I
8
stated,
million, as it were.
if you start out,
200 million?
So,
perhaps.
well, okay, so let's take this to Dr. Amadi. So for a lot of Nigerians watching, I mean, the simple solution to this is having electricity. I mean, having power constantly. I mean, we could talk about this all through the day, but I mean, if we don't see that solution or speak to it, then perhaps we've not done justice to this topic. So is this the silver bullet, metering everyone? Is it the silver bullet to ending the crisis in the power sector?
Metering is important. Metering goes more to justice, revenue protection. It doesn't create additional power. Well, it can create additional power if customers conserve power, and we argue that if you save 1 megawatt, then it goes back. But the critical issue here I want to bear in mind. First, localizing it's a good idea. I did the local content law, and I'm happy that. Bear in mind that many of these local producers are basically merchants who, that's the problem we have. They're going to be working with the discos and probably creating meters that are going to be bad quickly, and then they are using the metering plan to remove and reinstall meters. And so the metering gap, like you said, keep expanding. The second point to be made here is if there's power, if you have enough power, generated power, enough distribution capacity to wield them and to serve customers, and you still have unmetered customers, it's bearable. First, if customers are getting power, what makes estimated billing dangerous and provocating is that you are not getting power and you are being billed. So 3 problems here or solutions you can offer. Well, let's keep ramping up capacity, especially in the distribution sector, where we can deliver more power to the customer. Change management. This disclose, in fact, we have what we call methodology for estimated billing. Even if you don't close out the train gap, which I doubt this government's best effort, you can still have a disciplined sector. The regulator enforces a methodology for estimation. It's not rocket science. You can even estimate customers who are metered for a short period of time through some level of technology. Again, the third issue, very important here, is that
just a quick one, right?
Avoid too much.
Okay,
Yeah.
we need to go in the next 30, 60 seconds, if you don't mind. So, is it that the metering, the number of unmetered Nigerians or households is 6 million, maybe plus 1 or 2 million if there's further enumeration? Is that the actual figure?
No, it's not. Nobody knows. Because let me tell you, the discourse are contended that the figure is high. We don't, observers say it's actually low. That this discourse, that's why we asked them to do a GIS scientific customer elimination. For the past 4 years, it has not been done. When we gave them 6 months, they say it's too short and we'll.
But that also means that the NERC, the NERC does not have the capacity to verify the information given to them by the discos. As you see with the telecom sector. Telecom sector have the capacity.
Exactly. They don't. You need to generate quality. You need to have generate quality data at the disco level. The NRC will simply go through it. But the problem is that they need to have scientific basis to do that, and they are either reluctant or saying the cost implication of running a very scientific data analysis and capture of all their customers would be very high. So the regulator needs to mandate it. But I think we're getting there. Let's work with the 8 million that Zachary says.
Well, gentlemen,
6,000. Yeah,
well, it's an endless conversation. It sounds to me more like giving power to the people. We have to give power to the people on the terms of those who have the power. That's the way it's sounding right now. Please don't quote me on that one. But it also perhaps underscores the fact that there is a need for us to be precise about the number of households, depending on whose definition you're looking at, because the MPC's definition of household is completely different. Gentlemen, we expect that we'll have more on this and hopefully call you back some other time to have this conversation. Ahmed Zachary, Special Advisor to the President on Infrastructure, thank you so much for your time and information this morning, as well as Dr. Sam Amadi, former Chairman, NERC. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time this morning.
Let's jump right. The first of your messages, and this one is coming through from famous Timilane. Interesting name there. It says, it's becoming clear where our problems are coming from as a country. As my people used to say, if you can't rule or control your house, it's very difficult or impossible for you to rule a community. Our politicians and political parties have no focus. We need serious and immediate overhaul of our political system.
Take a look at this one from Festus Akimboyewa. The level of internal party democracy in our country will continue to be absent as long as ordinary members are not allowed to elect their party leaders fairly and transparently, participate in conference and policy making and selection of candidates for election. Sadly, all our political parties have these deficiencies.
The definition of a Nigerian political party is the collection of strange bedfellows, says Olorun Loba. They are not really men with the interests of the nation at heart. Many politicians are just political contractors. That's why an individual would deem it fit to take his party to court. Hardly find this happening in other parts of the world, and they can always find a loophole in the Nigerian law and indeed the judiciary to sway decisions to their favor.
This one is from Dan about the power sector. He says, the power sector of Nigeria is the heartbeat of the economy. For Nigerian economy to be competitive, its power sector should be fixed. To remedy the situation, we need to move towards renewable energy sources. However, complete development of solar plants is inevitable. Investment in new grid infrastructure is necessary to facilitate integration of intermittent sources. Integrate mini-grids into disco networks to supply power to underserved areas. Well, yeah, there are several other recommendations, so will be interesting. So that is it today, and it's good to know that some states are using gas rather than rely on regular power supply. So, well, that's it. What a week it's been. We thank you all for your time as well. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Okikilo.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful week.